Good morning, seller sessions, and good afternoon and good evening for everyone else in the world. I have with me Miss Cortney for part two of our wonderful Cortney series for the beginning of the year. And we are talking about money, money, money today. Welcome, Cortney.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone for tuning in.
I love having you on.
Thank you. It's a real honor
Just
to
in
be
case
here.
you didn't know that, I had to express that because
I love
for
it.
those who didn't join in last week, I was telling you all that Courtney has been my mentor for going almost 3 years, right? We've done
Oh,
2 years
yeah.
and a little bit, I think.
Uh-huh.
And I think you're stuck with me forever. So that's
It would be my honor, my privilege. I love it.
I absolutely love it. I know we had quite a few viewers last week, and I'm sure people are excited to see what we're going to talk about. And like we were talking before the show, money is definitely something that's always in people's minds. So I don't know if you want to start this off with maybe just some thoughts around money and why money is still so such a crucial topic that people actually don't want to talk about, but we like to talk about all the time.
Oh my God. Yes. Love to talk about money. And in fact, this is one of the things that I always tell people is, if you had a friend who talked to you the way you talk about money, would you still want to be friends with that person, right? Because lots of times people don't even realize a lot of what they're throwing around about money, ideas that they have, beliefs that they have, and how much they're influencing their relationship with money, right? Money is actually, if you think about it, money is just a reflection of your relationship with something much greater. And I don't know if I mean, we've talked about this before, but if you think about it, money is your relationship with really some pretty key concepts in your life in terms of your values and things that you hold dear, right? So, even for example, what I often come to with people around money is that money for them represents freedom ultimately. Like if you ask people why do you want money? And I think that's an interesting question, right? To pose to yourself, especially this new year, is like, if you want more money, why do you want more money? Like, what is driving your desire for more money? Because it's not the physical, whatever it is, dollars, euros, yen, it's really, it's what's represented by that money. And a lot of people don't have the best relationship with what's represented by that, even if that's what they would want more than anything. So it's kind of curious.
You're right. I mean, money is such an important tool, and I think people tend to attach feeling behind it. Depending on how they grew up. I was talking to a friend the other day where, in her family, money was seen as just something not everybody has reached to. They can't have money, and if you do have money, it's something that's evil in a sense. You only need a little bit to survive. So what happens is you create this relationship of almost like with a stranger, and just like you said, you wouldn't talk bad about a friend. Why would you talk bad about the money? So it's just interesting to get everybody's perspective around you when it comes to money. I grew up extremely poor. I'm sure a lot of people resonate with that, especially those who come from like Europe or other countries that were not that developed at that time. So for me, it was definitely a subject that was a little bit hard. I never really thought that I could have money. If money was just something that only those who are born into it, or somebody that's like a doctor or a lawyer, and these are my kid thoughts. Of course, now I have changed my perspective, but yet I see that coming up even for me once in a while, that fear of like, oh my God, what will happen if I run out? It's like a constant fear in the back of my mind, like buried deep down. Yet it's not something I don't think you can completely delete, right?
Yeah, I've definitely gone through periods in my own life as well where I was struggling to get by, pay the bills, time when I've had to borrow money and things like that. And I actually think that increases your reliance on this other thing that we were talking about last week. In other words, your kind of faith that it's sort of like a tree, if you think about it. Like there's moments of the year when trees are bare, right? But that doesn't make the tree any less capable of yielding fruits and leaves and all of that, right? And you just know and you recognize it in all of its magnificence, and you don't once stop to say, oh, it's a bare tree. You know what I mean? You're not looking at it in a spirit of lack. And I think what's really important for people who are listening is like this idea of lack, it doesn't really exist in nature. It doesn't really exist. So if you can just for a moment grasp that, it doesn't really exist, right? Lack doesn't really exist. If you look all around you, this is one of the most useful ways I've ever found for getting myself out of that mentality of lack whenever it's hit me, is I just go outside in nature and I just look around. I mean, if you just even sit by a stream or under a tree, you can see, whoa, this is not real, this illusion of lack. And but of course, you know, if you've experienced those times in your life, as we both have, where you were fearful about having enough, and if you look back, you somehow made it through, yes or no? And
Absolutely.
maybe even what I think is quite even more curious about that is not only did you make it through, but like I said, it increased your fortitude and increased your almost your beauty, if I can say that, right? It's like there's something about it that actually really was a beautiful gift. And I think if people can take a moment to say, oh, wow, wherever I am, whatever's going on, it's a gift. And if you can do that, you can connect with something that is a constant source of abundance. Because regardless of what you're looking at in terms of financially or materially what's going on around you, if you have that sense of, oh my God, I have everything. I have everything. I'm drawing my breath in this moment. I have everything. When you sense that, it's just like that tree that's without the leaves. It's perfectly whole. It's perfect. And so if you can take that and you can just say, oh, wow, even for a second, it's going to drastically change your relationship with money and your relationship with material outcomes.
Right. It's just, I think it's hard for people when they're in that low moment, when they really have nothing. And, yeah, you go in nature, you're like, everything around me is perfect. How do I bring that into my life? Because I think that's where people get blocked, because they are like, okay, even those who believe in this concept that everything is abundance and you create your own reality and you create your own path to success and wealth. However, it's so hard to step out of that feeling of fear and of lack, even though subconsciously because you've seen it happen multiple times in your life. Like, what's another way that somebody can really level up and bring that consciousness to, like, I will be okay?
Mm. Okay, so first, I think it's way, way, way more difficult to stay in the feeling of lack and fear. Let me put it differently. It's way more, it's a much greater expenditure of your energy. It's a much greater expenditure of your energy to stay in fear and lack. And the reason why that is because you are not aligned to what is most true in that moment when you're in fear and lack. In other words, you're not aligned to the intelligence that governs all of nature. So if you think about it, it's funny because we're reinforcing all the time. We're reinforcing certain beliefs and concepts and ideas and fears, right? We're reinforcing them. And that requires an expenditure of energy. In other words, when you're doing that, you're actually using the resources that you have. In other words, your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, which are very powerful, right? We talked about this in our last episode. You're using them for something you don't want, which again is a much greater expenditure of energy than using them to align with something that is more true for you, that is more aligned with actually this intelligence that we're talking about that governs everything else. So it's a little bit like, let me put it this way. It's a little bit like if you were to sit there and think all day, Is my heart beating? Is it not beating? Is it beating? Is it not beating? Oh my God, if it's not beating, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What's going to happen? Oh my God, my heart might not be beating, right? And like, what if it's not beating in 5 seconds from now? Fortunately, most people are not doing that. If you're doing that, then that's another story. We'll talk offline. But if you're doing that, if it's a little bit like that's what we're doing with money, or that's what we're doing with our businesses, is like, oh my God, it's going to work. It's not going to work. It's going to work. It's not going to work. And in fact, that expenditure of energy is exhausting. It's exhausting. And if for a moment you can say, I trust, which by the way is the root of the word confidence, confidere, confidence with trust, reliance, self-reliance. Like, it's funny because there was a point in history where self-reliance, was paramount in terms of one of the skills of what you needed to be a thriving human being. And at a certain point in our history, and you and I talked a little bit about this on our last live last week, we started to outsource everything and look somewhere else, like, where's my answer? Who's got my answer? And it's funny, even yesterday, I was listening to a podcast. I'm not going to name any names, but I was listening to a podcast of someone who actually is someone who I think is quite interesting in terms of the thoughts he generates, or at least the thoughts that are generated through him. And I was listening to this podcast, and he was talking about confidence, and he was talking about it again in that outward way, like as if it was something that you source from how other people view you. And it seemed to me, at least in terms of my own experience, that while it can be a co-creative phenomenon, in other words, you can somehow reinforce what I am internally sourcing, it's first and foremost something that you look inside to create that trust, because that intelligence that we're talking about, that is necessary to align to, for whether it be your wealth, your health, your well-being on any count, right? It's there, it's accessible to you. And if you will give yourself the time out to access it more and more, it will make itself more readily available and more readily visible in your material world. Okay. And then of course you have the reinforcement from everybody else. But I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of the fact, and we don't say, oh, okay, well, however much money I'm generating. Again, money, you can think of it almost like it's like a symptom where there's malaise. And it is a result where there is well-being, but it's still an effect. It's not a cause. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that. It's an effect. I see. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's I mean, this subject can be like open, and we could talk about it for hours. It's just I really want people to get the main point. So you said that what other people think of you, or what they think of the money that you generate, has an impact on you. Is that what you're saying? Like the confirmation of others that you will be fine, that impact your own beliefs?
Well, that's what I think society tells us in general. And I think that's in a sense erroneous. I think it can reinforce on either side. Again, it can reinforce the effect on either side. But the root cause is where you have responsibility and where you have choice. You have the agency of choice where it comes to, again, this is creation on any level, but when we're talking about it in terms of what you have or what you lack, you have the ability to choose where you're focusing. So for example, if we were looking at the times in your life or my life where if we're looking back, we say, oh, I didn't have anything, I had to borrow money. But did we get by? Was there something that allowed us to get by, and like I said, even become stronger because of that? And again, this is where the power of your attention and your focus and your beliefs override whatever it is you're being told by external forces and whatever is being reinforced by external forces. So this piece is so crucial, because a lot of people, again, they get lost in looking out, right? It's like, I'm going to look out, and because I don't have the shoes, or I don't have the same phone, or because I don't have, whatever it is, right? Or because I don't have the same, or I don't have own my own home, or whatever it is, I'm not good enough. Okay. But actually, when you start to source from this intelligence that we're talking about, and you start to align with this intelligence that we're talking about, you realize that actually you have everything and anything that you could ever want to create. It's funny though, because when you align to it, and you and I've talked about this, and we've talked about this quite a few times, that when you're really aligned to this truth, it's almost like everything you thought you wanted to create, it only becomes, it often feels superfluous, or it feels like, yeah, I could take it or leave it kind of thing, which is really an interesting phenomenon. But it's a great place to be in, because then you're there and you create that. And actually that gives way also to more giving, which is another conversation. But the thing that's necessary for people to understand is like, okay, if you're in this moment, and we've all been there, or not we've all, but a lot of us have been there, of, feeling like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills, or I don't know how I'm going to, any of that. Again, coming back to that, to the trust piece, is actually going to help you more than anything else. If you can realign with that idea of trust, again, just the same way about your heart beating, you're not fretting over it 24/7. You're not asking yourself, is it going to keep pumping blood to my vital organs, right? You're not doing that. And again, I know at first this can be a little tricky, because we're used to doing that, because we think this is under our control. Now, let me say one more thing about this, because this is even maybe more important, especially when people are feeling not aligned to it. Is lots of times, again, in the same way that we think we have to rely on outside forces to sort of tell us we're good enough to deserve something, or reinforce an idea that that wealth is available to us. There's something even more important that we do, is we often rely on other people. We think like other people are the source of our wealth. And this as well is kind of an illusion, because you are the source of your wealth. Your talents are the source of your wealth. What you're ready and willing and desirous to give to the world is the source of your wealth. The infinite intelligence that exists within you is the source of your wealth. Pipo Papo, who owns the corner store, is not the source of your wealth. Just not. So if you can be reminded of that, and you can say, okay, what talents do I possess? What gifts do I possess? What can I give to the world? And how can that gift generate the wealth that I'm seeking? And again, this is the same thing. You're aligning to that infinite intelligence, because that infinite intelligence wants to be expressed through and as you, as an individual form of human consciousness. And only you can be that individual form of expression. It doesn't exist for anyone else. It's no one else's. So if you can align to that, and you can align to that truth, you will start to see, holy moly. And again, even if at first you don't see the financial returns, although those will come, you will have a sense of peace that it won't even matter if you're living under a bridge. It will not matter. The wealth will be in you, because wealth is never anyway about a material return or a financial outcome. It's not about that. Wealth is a state of being. Wealth consciousness is a state of consciousness. It's a state of alignment with what is most true in and all around you.
And this is what we do every time we have a call. Now you guys can see why I love this woman so much. It's like, and I know for those listening, like this will resonate. Like it resonated through my body. Like I have chills just listening to it. And you see, that's what's beautiful about human nature. Like when we hear something, it automatically feels right inside ourselves. And because this is not something most people talk about, like for example, this is an Amazon podcast. Most people tune in to listen about, how to increase your sales. And we're all about that. We are the pioneers of, we want everybody to have wealth. And it's just, I am happy that people tune in to listen to a subject that's not really discussed that much. And I've noticed the more conversations about, not necessarily only money, but about our soul and how we can create from this place, that has nothing to do with Amazon or, with trading stocks or anything. It's just that piece, like you called it, inside of ourselves that help us create any type of businesses. And I feel like humans tend to really zoom in too much onto one specific thing, like Amazon, for example, right? We're like, oh, this is the only way we can make money. And most people think this is the only thing I'm good at. But
Mhm.
that force that made you good at Amazon can make you good at all the other things. It's just, you get successful in one thing and you think, oh my God, this is it. And then we go through periods of really high and really low. It's just part of our life. I don't know one person that said, ever since I was born, I became a millionaire and I have never had an issue. Like, if you ever meet that person, I would love to interview them, but I haven't yet. So it's not, this is the highs and the lows are just there for us to grow. And I
Mhm.
love that we can talk about this.
Yeah, and actually, we see lots of cases in history. If you look closely, people who were born into millionaire families, who had everything, who were given everything, and what happens to them? What do you often see that happens in the case of people who were given everything? They had no adversity. They've been to the best schools. They got the best, of everything. And I mean, we all know that that story often doesn't pan out that well. And then you look at people who came from really dire circumstances. I mean, look at someone we revere, right? Born to a 13-year-old mother, I believe, uh, was 13 herself when she gave birth to her first child, who was stillborn, was abused multiple times, was, in and out of, I think even after, I think at the age of 14 or 15, she was picked up by a man who said he was her father, who wasn't. She was lent out of a mental institution. I can't remember all the details of her story, but do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Oprah
Yes.
Winfrey.
Yes. We
Oprah
did talk
Winfrey.
about, yes.
And, like people sometimes think, well, this is my circumstance. This is what I was born into. This is what I was given access to. This is who I am. This is what I've known up until now. And here's what I'll tell you. There's a line in my second book. In fact, the editor, she, was working on it right now. She's like, I had to actually stop reading for at least 30 minutes after reading this sentence and just reflect on it. And the sentence was, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And so if you have these beliefs around money, and you said something really important before, you're in a space where people want everybody to succeed. Amen to that if it's true. And I say, if you're watching and you are among that group of people who, I know you, Isabella, for you, this is true, then I say kudos to you and keep on, because that's the energy, that's the spirit, that's the kind of belief. And if you're on the other hand thinking, oh, this is my lot, this is what I'm capable of doing, this is what I've always done, all of that, I would invite you to consider what you could be, how you could be kind of thinking differently about that, and how you could be starting to create different beliefs that are much more empowering in your life. Lots of times we don't understand the difference between a belief that we've sort of adopted and that we feel that we have some control over, maybe, and a belief that we is just a staple in our diet and that we've had for so long that we don't actually see that we have some sort of creative control or creative rights. Or actually, I would say, I don't really like the word control, so I would say choice, right? But if you start to realize, like, okay, wait, what if I had a choice here? What if I had a choice about this belief? Would I choose a different belief? If I believe that this is all that's available to me, there's lots of times in my career that I did things that actually I found out later were really crazy, but I didn't know at the time that I did them, right? At the time that I did them, I didn't know that there was a rule that precluded me from doing it, right? So whether that was when I was in corporate or when I was starting my own businesses, I didn't know that you needed to go through all these other things before you did this thing over here, right? But now that I know, I'm so grateful that I didn't know, because the beliefs that then I created were so much different from what was like the predetermined conditioning from a lot of people who were in that space. That makes sense?
Absolutely. And sometimes that's the best way. When I started my business, I had no idea how to run a business, and it wasn't even a business in my head. And, the road I took, and once I got really successful and I started talking to people, they're like, wait, you did that without like a CRM? Wait, you did that without hiring people? Wait, you did that without this? And then in that moment, when I heard that, I was like, I was scared for a second, even though it already happened. Like I already did all of it, but it imprinted this fear of like, oh my God, can I still be successful without having these things? And, again, it's like highs and lows. And sometimes I wish I didn't listen to that. But, we do want validation from our peers and those who are successful, and some cases those who appear successful, which is when you maybe take a wrong advice. But again, it's all part of the growing pains that we go through having a business. I mean, I can look back on the past year and I'm like, oh, I should have not done that, I should have not done that. But there's some things that I'm like, okay, good for you, you did that. So but it's great to have people around you that support you and love you, and they want the best for you, but it's not always the best advice that you receive from them, because we all go through different lives, different experiences, and this is something I'm definitely guilty of always trying to validate my ideas with my peers. And it's very hard for them to put themselves in my shoes because they have not experienced what I've experienced. But because I see them in a certain light, I feel like they would know more than me. And this is
Mhm.
something, you know this about me, and I've been working on still taking that advice and appreciating them for taking their time to spend with me. But at the same time, I have to um, choose and be like, is this good advice for me or no? And people who give you advice, they do it from their heart. They want you to, especially if they're really close friends, right? They want the best for you. But even the best of friends cannot be in your shoes. They can only give you advice based on their own experience. So, um, and I wanted to touch on this because you said, we do get a lot of validation from those around us. If somebody's like, oh my God, you're so wealthy, you're so successful. Yes. Does it feel good? It feels amazing. And then it enforces that. And then you kind of rely on that statement. Like, if people don't say that anymore, am I still successful? So it goes both ways. Like, if I'm waiting for everybody to tell me I'm successful when they don't, or when they tell me I'm a failure, how would I take that? So it's
Mm.
important to always keep that peace inside and know that everything that you create is because of who you are. And again, it's good to receive laurels, is that what it's called? And it's good to receive all this amazing feedback, but look on the other side. Like, when if you don't, you can rely on other people to tell you how successful you are.
Yeah, I think the more you tap into the truth of who you are, the less important both praise and critique become. Like for me, it very rarely moves me anymore either way, right? It just doesn't, it doesn't have so much an effect. But I remember at a certain time in my life, it was like I was looking like, did they know what it is? Did someone appreciate it? Did I get a like, And now it's kind of one of those things where I'm on to the next thing, because I'm just all, my focus is on creating and staying in that alignment that I was talking about before. But it is really important, I think, to note as well that you said it was kind of behind some of your words, I think, but it was this idea that all other people can do is remind you of what you already know. Ram Dass, aka Richard Alpert, ex-Harvard professor and just a great orator and a great thinker, he once said that he would remind people of what they knew, but the perplexing problem was they didn't know they knew. That you don't know, you know. And so sometimes we forget, but that's again our lack of alignment with what's true, with this intelligence that I'm talking about. And so when you're not aligned with it, you look outside and you say like, There's another way to think about it, is almost like, your need to be seen can make you kind of invisible.
Mm.
Like when you stop needing to be seen, if you don't need to be seen and you're just kind of hanging out doing your own thing, it seems kind of funny, but one of the things I often tell people when they come to me, and I've got, everything from, like huge corporate clients to, whoever comes and they want advice, and I say, the first thing I got to let you know is that I don't have your answers, which you would think would be like the first thing to get people going for the door. But actually it's the truth of it, right? Like, I'm not going to give you the 5-step system, but if you can find somebody who actually reminds you of what you do know and reminds you of the truth that lives in you. And again, there are, some teachers throughout history, and I think anyone, like, you do this for people all the time, is reminding them, hey, I might not know what you need to do, but you do know what you need to do. And so if you can source from that, then will have all the riches you desire.
Mm. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. I mean, we all do this. We all rely on somebody else to tell us. And it's only when we find that inside ourselves that is when we really see the light. And, even when knowing this, I still sometimes fall in on the other side, like, oh my God, am I okay? Am I doing okay? And, only you can create your own path, and it's tough. It's so tough when you're in that low moment to bring yourself out of it. And it's like, it's just, the best way that I find that I calm myself is just through, maybe some meditation, or if you don't meditate, just by sitting in that moment of like, okay, I accept the reality of anything that's going on. However, I know that I have a bigger purpose and I know where I'm heading towards. And that's what keeps me going every day, because it's not always roses and flowers. We have some days that it's, a lot of rain, and again, it's all part of the process. And if you think about it, that's what's beautiful as well, because if you don't have bad days, how do you really enjoy the good days?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's so much more intense because you've been through those dark days, and you appreciate the light so much more than if you've never seen darkness in your life.
Yeah, and I think there's even another. So for me, it's like now when I go through those dark moments, it's funny because I actually have so much appreciation real time for them as well. And I know you and I have talked about this, and I know you've experienced this too. Is almost like, sometimes I call them really painful gifts, but it's like when you're realizing real time, oh my God, like there's something divine, there's something beautiful, there's something about those moments that actually, if you can really, again, if you can be in that alignment that we're talking about, you'll experience them completely different. Like they will come to you and it'll just be like a wave. You're no longer judging the wave. You're no longer saying like, this is a good wave, that's a bad wave. This wave is okay, that wave's not okay. You're just like, oh my God, look at this wave. And you're living it and you're like, wow, this is an intense wave. And you are actually, if you're surfing it, you're actually enjoying it, and you might even fall over. I remember the one time I did a talk for the surf industry a few years back, and they took me on surfing. They took me out surfing, and I remember I got beaten up so bad. I mean, so bad. I think there was like I had bruises all over, and but I enjoyed, even like I was laughing like crazy even as I was getting those bruises, and I was enjoying it so much. And that is when you're living life that way, where you're also getting beaten up, but you'll see as you get more and more aligned to this. And again, the alignment comes, might come in the ways that you're talking about of meditating. It can come from getting outside. It can come from dancing to your favorite song. It can come from just connecting with someone deeply. It can come from all sorts of different places. It just comes, and sometimes it comes in ways that you expect, and sometimes it comes in ways that you totally don't expect. But the more you live in alignment with it, the more you're like, this is an interesting wave. Wow, what's going on here? You become really curious and you just have fun with it. And you don't try to resist it or say, this is a bad wave. Like, I got to wait it out let me go to the shore and just kind of wait it out, because nothing really all that interesting is going to happen over there. But a lot of really interesting things are going to happen when you let yourself just be in the waters and dance with them.
So beautiful. You're such a poet, Courtney.
Oh, Dio mio.
You
Grazie.
are. You have a way of expressing statements that just make sense, and I'm sure those who are listening are feeling the same, because I do every time I talk to you. And it's, again, it's so important to talk about these things, because it's not something you just hear on TV, or most people think, oh, this is woo woo or whatever. But yeah, when they experience in their life, because we all experience this at some point, like whether you believe this is true or not, I am certain you had moments in your life where things just align, and you're trying to dismiss that as a coincidence. And when you do that, you, again, you kind of leave it up to fate, instead of taking control over that and say, this is mine, I created this. Because the more you recognize that, the more you respect it and honor it, and the more you duplicate it in your life. So instead
Mhm.
of just dismissing and say, oh, it's just a coincidence that this person called right when I needed them for something that I've been praying for, right? It's so
Mhm.
easy to dismiss it and say, oh, it was just luck. Instead of doing that, just say, wow, thank you, I really created this. Because
Mhm.
then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and then that muscle gets stronger and stronger and stronger.
Right, right. You're reinforcing that neuroplasticity. And, when you talk about it, and yeah, maybe people listening who also haven't listened to our other interviews might think, oh, some of it's woo woo, but there's loads of science behind everything that we're discussing right now, obviously. And, but regardless of like whether you want to look at the science or not, it's actually quite irrelevant, because if you just look at the true nature of what you are, if you look at when you were born, you were fascinated by the unknown. The unknown was like, whoa, the coolest thing in the world. You wanted to go touch the stove and stick your fingers everywhere. And I remember my daughter, she like literally she needed to like lick things. She was very tactile. She's still very tactile. Like, she needed to touch and feel and taste. And I tried as much as possible to not limit that, because we live in a society that says, oh my God, look out, don't do that. You're going to get hurt, watch out here, watch out there. And we think, that that's kind of our responsibility. But what ends up happening is we condition ourselves to fear the unknown. But everything lives in the unknown. I mean, all possibility lives in the unknown. It lives in the space, it lives in the empty space. And if you think about it, these last 2 years, I think what's been so frightful for most people who haven't sort of embraced that fact earlier on is that there's this illusion of stability, that, or planning, like, okay, I'm going to plan the next 5 years and everything's going to be okay. And again, it's the same type of thing of, is my heart beating, is it not beating, is it beating, is it not beating, and when we had to let go of that, I call it the 0.000000001% of things that we actually think are in our control. What's in your control, I'll tell you what's in your control. It's not the way this year goes. It's not how much money you attract. It's not the house you buy, or how your kids are going to behave, or all the stuff that you think, all. I'm sorry to say this, because a lot of people might feel a little deflated, but all the things that you think are like kind of in your, that's not what's in your control. What's in your control is where you're placing your attention and your intention. But if you understand the power of your attention and your intention, then you won't worry about all the other things that you want to happen. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. But would you say that people, I mean, this is like one thing people do. The first thing they do for New Year's, they make a list of 10, 20, 100 things they want to accomplish. So do you think it's still important to kind of keep something like that, or not
I
necessarily?
do. I do, but I'll tell you what I think. All right. So I do think it's important to have a vision, a clear vision. Without a vision, the people perish, right? Having a clear vision is important. The other reason why it's important is, there's two things. You got to have a clear vision of where you are and a clear vision of where you're going. Okay. So like if I make this example in my first book, if I want to get to Chicago, but I don't know if I'm in New York or LA, I have a problem, right? Like I need to know where I am, and I have to have a kind of a clear idea, or at least something of an idea of where I want to end up. Yes or no? Yeah?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. But if you look at it, that is sort of in my second book, I'm talking about the difference between a Newtonian approach to change, which is like a classical physics approach to change, where I take those steps. So say I'm in Chicago and I got to figure out how to get to LA, right? And there are loads of different ways. I remember asking a client of mine once, a very, very wealthy client. I said, if you're in Chicago and you're going to LA, how would you get there? And her response was, private jet. And I was like, okay, so you're not taking like the public transport, like the Greyhound bus, okay?
Right.
You're not walking, but there are multiple ways that we can get there. And that's the idea, is like there are multiple ways, but we know, okay, sooner or later I'm going to get there. And this is sort of a classical physics approach to change. It's like cause and effect, right? It's like I'm gonna take those steps and I'm eventually going to get there. And then there's a quantum approach to change. And this is what I want to talk about, where your truest control, although I'm hesitant to use the word control for various reasons. So I'm going to use the word choice. Okay. So your conscious choice is where you're putting your attention. So the more you're actually aligning to the energy of what you're holding in your vision. Okay. So if your vision is that you want to live an abundant life, okay, the more you're aligning to the energy of abundance in your current space and time, the more you're taking the quantum approach. Now, the quantum approach, what does it say? Because what does quantum physics say? Quantum physics says a particle is a wave at the same time. We've talked about this in previous interviews, right? It's a wave up until the point of observation, i.e. attention. In other words, it is a wave. It is a probability outcome until the moment that you put your attention on it. Once you put your attention on it, it becomes a particle, i.e. it assumes material form. So that means, what that translates to is that you have an infinite field of probability outcomes available to you, and you're putting your attention, which is your most precious resource, where are you putting your attention? If you're putting your attention on your vision, and you literally, the more you become aware of this, anyone listening, the more you become aware of this, the more you become aware that, oh my God, if I'm actually going to sit down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes and really feel my vision, feel into my vision, not create some lofty plan, although those things are fine. Again, that's the Newtonian approach. That's an effective approach. I've taken that. I've talked about it. I've taught it. It works for sure. And there are faster ways to get there in that approach as well. But the more you're actually just taking a time out and saying, I'm going to align to this. I'm going to align my energy. I'm going to align the electrical impulses that I'm emitting from my body. I'm going to align the magnetic responses that I'm receiving to the object of my desire. The more you do that, the more you will actually realize it's already yours. And that's the irony. That's the paradox. It's already yours. All the wealth you could ever want is already yours because it already exists in this field. And if you are able and willing and conscious enough to create that portal for your attention to sit there and to sort of relish in it, the more you do that, the more you're drawing the probability outcome to you. It's very simple. It's actually quite simple. It's so simple, in fact, that it's evasive because, even though Da Vinci said simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, people tend to discount it and they think they need to make things really, really complex. So they build all these castles and then they're looking here and looking there and who's got my answers? Do you have my answers? Who's got my answers? Who's got my answers? She's got my answers. No. Bring it back. You have your answers. And if you actually can align your energy to the vision that you can see. By the way, vision, the way the ancients talked about vision, was not some 5-year plan. It was not some far off goal. The meaning of vision is to see clearly in the present. In other words, can you see who you are right now? In other words, can you feel who you are? Can you feel the probability outcome of who you're becoming? And if you can feel it, if you can tune into it, if you can tap into it, the more you do that, the more you're aligning with it. The more you're aligning with it, the more you're drawing it to you. It's very, very simple.
So good. And this goes the other way too. If you bring in your attention, and you are creating something basically out of nothing, because it's that simple, you are the creator. What happens is, if you tend to focus on the lack and everything you don't have, you also create that into your reality, right? So this is a very important piece of information right here.
Yeah, this is actually, something I always say, right, is like you're either using you're walking around with the most magnificent operating systems ever created. I mean, artificial intelligence might surpass that, but we are creating artificial intelligence. So that sort of begs the question of, well, that begs a lot of questions. But as of now, you're walking around with these magnificent operating systems. The problem is no one ever taught you how to use them. That's where my work comes in, is I look to, show people, hey, you're walking around with this. Let's use it in ways that actually serve you rather than not, to create what it is that you want rather than what you don't want. But the problem is, again, most of us have been conditioned, and we've been brought up and raised in societies and environments that actually have us focusing our most precious resource, our attention, on things that we don't want. And it's interesting because I often talk about this. What do you think companies spend the most amount of money on? It's your attention, right? Like, because once I've got your attention, I might be able to influence your beliefs. Once I influence your beliefs, I might influence your buying patterns, and not just your buying patterns, but it goes far beyond that. It's not just companies, right? It's interest groups and all sorts of other things. So again, where are you placing that? And once you you just begin to realize, whoa, wait a second, I have this opportunity to actually choose. Because again, this comes down to what you believe you're consciously able to choose, and kind of your conscious beliefs and your unconscious beliefs. And that's another piece. A lot of people don't look at that. They just assume, well, that's just the way it is. Your unconscious beliefs is what you're assuming is that's just the way it is. But I'm telling you, I'm the living proof that it's not just the way it is, and that you really can start to change those as well, depending on where you're choosing to put your attention. So the point you're making is really accurate, and I think it's a really great opportunity, especially now where most people in the new year are thinking about what they want, is the very simple question of, where am I placing my attention? And it takes a bit of effort at first to turn the ship around, because you got to think of it, it's like a ship, right? So you can't just, it's like the Titanic. You can't just like, oh, I'm going to just turn the wheel over here and I'm going to do a 180, right? Like, it doesn't work that way. But if you continue to make, I don't want to actually, let's not compare it to the Titanic. Let's just compare it to a huge ship, because if you start to make those micro adjustments, you won't see it first. There won't be this noticeable grand difference. And it's interesting. Studies say generally around like 40 days is where you're going to start to notice. What I've seen in my own experience personally, and also working with, at this point, like thousands of people, is really it comes with, so it's also the intensity and the level of commitment you have behind where you're putting your attention. And that in and of itself can be kind of a, it's like a superhuman effort at first. If you're making huge adjustments, you have to be careful about how you go about that, because you're completely, your whole nervous system is like, what is she doing? We were going this way. And it's just like, so you have to be a little bit mindful about how you do that. Although you can make those leaps, but if you don't want to make the leaps and you kind of want to take an easier approach to it, normally it's around 40 days where you're going to start noticing some huge difference. I don't know if you've ever heard of that study. It's a fascinating study. It's been years since I've even thought about it, but they did this study with people from NASA, and they outfitted them with these convex goggles. So they were eyewear, basically, that reversed their vision. So they were seeing everything upside down. So they because they were trying to liken it to when they would be on the moon, right? So it was like everything in their reality was, literally upside down. And if I look at this glass, if you turn over, all this kind of thing. So what they noticed is their vital signs were completely out of whack. They were in huge stress, right? Their amygdala was on overdrive. It was just crazy, right? And I think it was 26 days after that. So constant wearing of these goggles. It was like somehow 20 some odd days after that the first astronaut it was his new reality, or I don't know if it was a he or she. I think it was a he. It was his new reality. And then all the other astronauts in the subsequent days followed suit. In other words, they completely flipped their reality because their constant new reality was different. And if you look at even all the conditioning that's happening right now, we won't go into that, but like the more you get conditioned, the more it just becomes what is, but it's actually, you don't have to buy into that conditioning. There's a phenomenon in psychology. It's called learned helplessness. It's not just in psychology. You can see it in, I think we were even maybe talking about this in a previous interview, is like, like if you put a grasshopper in a jar and it starts to try to jump out, but you got the cap on it, after a while it'll stop. And then if you remove the cap, it's not gonna try anymore, right? Because it becomes like, that's just not possible for me. And what I would love for everybody listening is, I am the proof. You are the proof, Isabella. I mean, so many examples of the proof of you actually can at any given time say, I'm not going to accept this as the reality of who I am. The reality of who I am is infinite. The reality of who I am doesn't have any boundaries. The reality of who I am is something, someone, a being that can really create any probability outcome that I desire. And so how do I step into that? And the more you expose yourself to conversations like this, the more you expose yourself to information that actually uplifts you, empowers you, gets you understanding who and what you really are, the more you're going to start to be able to tune into that, instead of, as you came to with this question of really who you're not and what you're not.
Thank you for that. I believe that truly with my heart. How does somebody that has not ever been exposed to this, and all they think is, this is all the cards that I have, I grew up with this family, and I can only get a job as a waiter or a waitress or whatever. Not that that's a bad job, but for somebody that wants more in their life, what's maybe one or two things that they can do now to believe in themselves more? Because for us it's easier to do it because we haven't I was lucky enough, I guess, or fortunate enough where I called it into my life. But there was something in my life at some point where this was an opportunity for me to learn that there's another way. But I find that I meet a lot of people who have never even heard of this concept of creating your own reality. And even maybe for those who are listening right now, maybe this is not something they've ever heard before. So how do you get even like maybe the first step, just that one little tiny seed that they can take today, that they can start using it into their life to believe in themselves more?
Okay, well, first I'd say anyone who's listened this far, anyone who's here, you have the seed in you. You have the seed of this in you. If you're listening, you're still tuned in, you're still using your attention in these ways to focus on this, the seed is already in you. And that seed is an evolutionary impulse. And so at this point, you have a choice. You have a choice to continue to listen to that evolutionary impulse and to continue to foster and care for that evolutionary impulse. Or you have the choice to say, it's not for me. And we all get that choice, even if we think that, we got lucky. I mean, the truth of the matter is, and I'd like you to go to some of your story here, because the truth of the matter is you didn't get lucky. You got pretty unlucky lots of times, but you had a seed. You had something in you that said, I think there's more. I think there's more. And you didn't stop. And you know what? Lots of times we say, and I look at this, this is a phenomenon I study a lot. Why certain people have that and other people don't. And the answer is we don't know. We don't know. We don't know what gets certain people to persist and what gets other people to not to persist. But I will say, if you're listening to this and you got this far, you have it. You have it. You wouldn't have gotten this far in an age where people don't listen to something more than 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute. Like, I mean, I talk to some of these people out there and they're like, oh, that video was so long and it's like a 2 minute video. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, I'll listen to the same things over and over again. By the way, if you found something in this, listen to it again and again and again. If you found something in something else that you said, oh my God, that sparked that thing in me, that what that spark is your evolutionary impulse. It's calling you to what you're meant to be. It's calling you to become who you really are. And so if you've gotten that, then just go back to it, go back to it, go back to it. I mean, I'm at a place in my life where, you know, I've done a lot of things. I've done a lot of things that, you know, that I intended to, that I wanted to. I created a lot of, you know, really cool things in my life. I'm so far from everything I would want to do. But at the same time, I'm also so satisfied. But that doesn't mean that I stop learning and I stop growing. And if there's something that sparks that evolutionary impulse, where it reminds me of my own desire for growth, my own vision, like we were talking about before, I go back to it over and over. You know, there's recordings I've listened to over and over and over and over and over again. And some people would say, like, why? You know, you already listened to it. Go on to the next thing. Because every time I listen to it, I'm getting something more. Every time I listen to it, or every time I read it, or, you know, whatever, every time I come into contact with it, I am awakening to more and more of my own potential. So, you know, those are the two things. One, remember that if you're here and you made it this far, you have it. You have that persistence that I'm talking about, and not that many people do. So, whatever it took for you to get there, congratulations, and keep going. And the keep going is whatever it is that is sparking that, whatever is inspiring you, whatever is empowering you, whatever is uplifting you, go back to that. Instead of going to the things that are disempowering you, whether that be your phone, whether that be, you know, whatever, like TV, all the other things that are out there that you might be like, oh gosh, I finished watching this thing and I feel sick to my stomach.
Mm.
I finished scrolling through some feed and I feel like my head is spinning. Well, that might be a clue right there.
Yep.
That maybe that actually isn't the best thing for you. So if you just pay attention, you start to pay attention, what is actually feeding my growth and what is stunting my growth. And when you do that, you will again start to align with that intelligence that I'm talking about. And the more you align to that intelligence that we're talking about, the more you will actually be well on your way to whatever it is that you want to create.
So beautiful. And we got a beautiful comment. Thank you, Isabel. And Courtney, yes, I got it in me. I love that. I love that. I love talking about it over and over again. And I don't think I'll ever get tired of talking about this, because, you know, we all have a purpose in this world. And, you know, maybe that's something we can talk about on our next episode. Because I feel like purpose is what drives us, and most people go throughout their life thinking they don't have a purpose, you know, because they're so busy trying to chase money, trying to chase love, trying to chase this. Whereas if you could only find out what your purpose is, I feel like everything else will be aligned to that, because then everything you do is going towards that goal. So just like you talked about the vision and, you know, the list of all the things you want to be, I feel that all that could be resumed into one thing, one higher thing. And then from then on, it's like working backwards. And I've always loved that. Like, find what your purpose is first, and then align everything else with that, whether it's your family, your values, where you're looking into a relationship, or money. Everything has to do with your higher purpose. So thank you for today, Courtney.
Thank you, my love. As always, it's been fantastic talking to you and to everybody else who joined. I really loved that comment. You do have it in you. And it's been great to be here. So thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you. I know it's been an hour. It's like it's been 5 minutes, right? Every time we talk about this, we can never end it. So thank you. I love you. I
I
will
love
see
you.
you next week. Tune in, everyone, on Seller Sessions for our maybe not our last session of the year. Maybe we'll have you on down the road. But for this series, I wanted to have Corny 3 times because it's one of my favorite numbers too. So I will see you all next week. Thank you, Corny. Love
Bye,
you.
everybody. Thank you. Ciao, Bella.